Good morning, everyone. Hmm. Hope everybody could find the stream this morning. A little less numbers than normal, and I wonder if it had to do with somehow the stream wasn't set to public. So I hope that didn't confuse anyone. But welcome back to the morning coffee time gathering we have. I see lots of people clicking in and saying good morning and hello. So before getting into any questions or reflections, I'll just give a little bit of time, make sure everyone's here who wants to be here. So we have another beautiful sunny day here in White Salmon, and a good deal of rain over the last couple days has kind of freshened everything up, and spring is moving into its fullest, I would say. So, and I enjoyed listening to Ajahn Sona's Dhamma talk last night, the third in the series on the retreat. And it was interesting, he didn't spend too much time on using the strategy to attend to the body posture, or the body postures, I should say. Oftentimes we talk about cultivation of sati and mindfulness and our meditation in the four postures, but in the Satipatthana Sutta and the Satipatthana Sutta, there's an expansion of how one practices mindfulness and clear comprehension with regard to the body, using body postures. So, and Ajahn touched on that, but didn't go into much detail, and instead was talking about the contemplation of the body with reference to the 32 parts of the body contemplation, or the 5 parts of the body, which is kind of the foundation for the contemplation of the 32 parts of the body. And this is very much part of mindfulness of the body. So it's not a teaching that many have come across in some of the different Vipassana Theravadan communities, and I'd say even monks and nuns in our tradition don't tend to give a lot of public teachings about it. I think it can be a bit confusing or off-putting to some that are unfamiliar with that, or unfamiliar with the teachings of the Buddha in the suttas. So I was happy to see that Ajahn spent some time introducing that to people, as there's quite a wide audience on YouTube, both presently for this retreat, and these talks will be up there for some time. And I enjoyed his presentation of it. So it'd be interesting to hear going forward how that struck other people. I saw somewhere in the comments here someone regarding this image that Ajahn offered about the helium balloon, kind of contrasting the difficulty in establishing sort of sati and staying present, and how the body can be really an excellent anchor, or sometimes I talk about it as like home base, because it is coarser, it is material, and the Buddha describes it as like a slower phenomena. It changes less rapidly, at least in our subjective experience of it, than the mind itself. And for those who hadn't listened to the talk yet, he likens the the mind to a helium balloon. And mindfulness of the body can act as an anchor, just as a parent would tie the cord of a helium balloon around the wrist of their son or daughter, so that in a moment of forgetfulness, it doesn't fly away. So, okay, well, we have something more like regular numbers, so I think everybody who wants to be here is here. I was also happy Ajahn shared this story of the doctor. I'd heard this before. And just in brief, for those who might not have heard it, he relates the story of this doctor that he met before in one of the monasteries he was living at. And this doctor had an experience that was maybe part of what prompted him to pick up meditation so that he could learn more about himself, where he was dealing with patients all the time, working in the ER, and at some point decided he needed to get a blood test. His doctor friend couldn't show up, so he decides to do it himself. And at the sight of a couple drops of blood leaking out as he finishes taking the blood test, he faints, passes out, knocks his head at the sight of his own blood, and then wakes up in a hospital bed later, realizing what has happened, and is struck with the reality that he doesn't really know himself. There's hidden parts of who he is, and hidden parts of his relationship to the body that he doesn't know much about, and that launched him into his meditation search and practice. So the one thing I wanted to do was maybe just read through a little bit of the instructions that we find in the Satipatthana Sutta on contemplating the body, especially the body in all of the postures. And this, I read this out for the question and answers group yesterday afternoon. And since Ajahn didn't go into it in much detail, I thought maybe I would offer it here because there's such an overlap between the people showing up here and the people doing the retreat. It might be useful to refresh our minds about the instructions that are there in the sutta. When going forward and returning, he acts clearly knowing. And clearly knowing here is sampajanya. When looking ahead and looking away, he acts clearly knowing. When flexing and extending his limbs, he acts clearly knowing. When wearing his robes and carrying his outer robe and bowl, he acts clearly knowing. When eating, when drinking, consuming food, and tasting, he acts clearly knowing. When defecating and urinating, he acts clearly knowing. When walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, and waking up, talking and keeping silent, he acts clearly knowing. So this, in short, is a summary of a lot of the main postures and features and actions of the life of a bhikkhu as he kind of moves through his day. And I think we can safely assume the encouragement there in the sutta is that one can use everyday mindfulness, or one can use all the postures that one is moving through, even the act of falling asleep, waking up, eating, tasting, chewing, moving, touching. And this is part of the Satipatthana that has found its way into sort of many teachings and many popular, even secular instructions on the cultivation of mindfulness. And it's an important way that we sort of bridge what some might perceive as a gap between what we think of as formal meditation and the rest of our life. while formal meditation is important, of course, this whole endeavor we're engaged in is for our life. And formal practice and retreat, periods of retreat, and periods of being able to get teachings are kind of high leverage, high value moments, but our life can't be completely saturated with enough of those to kind of do the trick. And there is this kind of larger sort of process of learning how to be in the world. The suffering is not something that just happens on the mat. The suffering is something that happens kind of scattered, spread out through our life, all the relationships, all the situations and activities that we find ourselves in. And this hasn't yet been emphasized by Ajahn, but the purpose of these different tools and teachings and foundations, if we take the translation of the foundations of mindfulness, or Ajahn Jeff sort of uses frames of reference. These are various ways that we can accomplish right effort and develop mindfulness with the goal of overcoming unskillful states of mind, chiefly the hindrances, and cultivating the 7 factors of awakening, and building the kind of strength of heart, the foundation, and the habits that help support the 8th factor, samma samadhi. And it's difficult to kind of extend this easily. I've met so many people over the years who've gone and done a retreat, and then maybe at the end of the retreat they got some encouragement or instruction, or even on their own, they seize upon the value of mindfulness and awareness and cultivating a habit of staying in the present moment. And they try to take that sort of into their life, and oftentimes that can create a lot of frustration because it's very difficult to do. It's difficult to stay mindful and grounded in the present moment in your workplace, maybe in your family life, in speaking. It's a little easier with the more solitude we have, the more silence we have, the more spacious the different environments and responsibilities that we're engaged in, or the tasks that we're engaged in are. Like famously sort of washing the dishes or sweeping the paths in the monastery, it's a little easier to return to yourself and be fully present and just anchor the mind with and be with this kind of attention to the body sort of moving through space. But it's really a broad field, and something that we should give some sort of consideration to. Maybe start off with the things that are easier. Part of the value of doing walking meditation and making that a regular practice of ours is to sort of create more of a bridge between the more formal, settled, and supportive conditions of sitting meditation to our daily life. And also part of what goes on in monasteries, part of the opportunity to go and visit a monastery and stay in a monastery, I think, is also a bridging experience. It's a place where people are living 24/7. There's work and activities going on, but there's also meditation. There's also time for silence. There's time for solitude. The conditions, the everyday conditions in our monasteries are not as refined as if you would go to a well-established, well-designed retreat center where you can engage in your practice wholeheartedly under conditions of noble silence with minimal or no duties or responsibilities. Life in the monastery is not like that. Sometimes we have periods of time that are like that, but it's the place where people live. It's a living community, and things have to happen. People get sick, work has to be done, chores happen, accidents happen, people come and visit. There's talking, there's problems to deal with. And so, the monastery, in my experience, and one of the opportunities that it values. It offers not just monastics, but also lay people, as we have guest programs in many of our monasteries, is this kind of bridging experience where you're in an environment where you can it maybe don't have the same familiar sort of pressures or the full range of challenges that your everyday environment, your everyday responsibilities and relationships offer you, but something more in the middle there where you can practice staying with the present moment and staying in and with the body sort of in a more connected way as you move through the day. When we teach meditation retreats, or when I do, especially day-long retreats, I oftentimes encourage people, as they have a longer chunk of practice, to really consciously try to practice a continuity of mindfulness in postures. It's maybe easy to sort of think of a sitting and a walking period as very discrete, or even a break as a very discrete, separate activity. But in the context of retreat, you really have this kind of good opportunity to sort of practice attending to your life as this kind of continuous flow that sort of is unfolding and manifesting in the present moment, and it's something that you can train yourself to be with in a more clear and conscious way. I think these teachings on the postures are very practical sort of things to take to heart, and maybe pick up a few of them along with the practice of walking meditation as a way to stay grounded and connected in the present moment. And again, to overcome the hindrances, to overcome mental restlessness and proliferation. You find the mind just spinning off into the past, into the future, into thoughts of greed or ill will, or dullness. Come back, reestablish one's attention in the body. And I find over the years it becomes more inherently a pleasant sort of place to be and return to. There's something almost thrilling about just being with the body, especially the body in motion. I remember years ago, an old friend of mine shared this cute little video from the New York Times, and it was about this man who had been a doctor, and I forget what. He was very unhappy with his life, even though he had a certain amount of financial and professional success. And he went through some transformation, reevaluating his life. And at the time they make this video, he had devoted, I guess, the whole of his life to skating. And he lived in Southern California, I believe, in the LA area, and spent a great amount of his day, and had organized his life so he could skate in slow motion on these paths that go along the ocean side there. And I don't know if it's Venice Beach or one of these places down in Southern California, but there's this beautiful little mini documentary. It was 7 or 10 minutes long. And this guy goes out and he looks a bit crazy. He's oftentimes skating on just one skate with one foot lifted up, crouched down, and he just has this crazy look of attentiveness and bliss as he's skating in super slow motion. And he does this so often that he's a local character, and oftentimes people are smiling and saying, "Hey, morning, Slow Mo." He's got this nickname, Slow Mo. And when he talked about why it is that he does this, it sounded very much like akin to meditation. And he described this euphoric feeling, and there was a little bit of science in there. There is something, I guess, in the inner ear, and we're sensitive to this feeling of floating or drifting or acceleration. And you don't have to be in a rocket or a carnival ride or something for that sensation to be sort of triggered. And I guess this is a lot of what he's focusing on when he's out skating around, is like he'll push off, and then his attention kind of goes into that sort of sensation of the body just like moving through space. And he describes it as very pleasant, very kind of blissful. And I have something of the same sensation when I'm walking and doing walking meditation, or when the mind is in a very balanced, mindful state, clearly comprehending what's going on with the body, especially when I'm doing light chores or physical work that doesn't require a lot of thinking, or when I'm doing walking meditation, oftentimes on alms round, uh, walking through the forest or walking through the town, if there's no need to talk or interact with people, it come back to the body, and it just reestablish that sort of sense of like being the witness and the knower of the body sort of moving through space. And sometimes, thoughts are, it's not like the thinking mind completely shuts down a lot of the times when you're attending in this way, but you have this anchor in the present moment. And if there's nothing important like that you really need to pursue at that time, or if you need rest and refreshment in the mind, you just kind of return to that. And so thoughts bubble up, impressions bubble up. Sometimes something does need to be said. Sometimes there's an interaction, like maybe we approach someone's house, and then it's not appropriate to be totally inward focused, but as grounded as you can. You give your attention to what's needed, and then return to the body, and just moving through space. And when the conditions are well supported for that kind of posture of awareness or something, it can be very blissful, and it's very easeful and blissful. It's almost like you're just floating through life. And there's even some sort of sense of the doer and the self that diminishes and starts to fade into the background. Um, there's not this kind of strong sort of sense of self like I'm walking. It's just the body's walking, and mindfulness and awareness is witnessing the sensations of the body moving through space, as well as the various sense impressions coming in. So I thought I'd read that out and talk just a little bit about mindfulness of the postures, and maybe in summary, just think about a few of these that you can pick up to start working on, to build a foundation, to build a bridge into your life. It can be a little bit too much just to sort of say, I'm going to be mindful no matter what I do. Part of what enhances memory and mindfulness is having a determination or a clear kind of focus. And so calling them out and making one or more various postures a clear focus of awareness can be very helpful. In the monastery, Ajahn Chah encouraged a lot of bowing when you come and go from your monk's hut, when you come and go from the meditation building or a public building, when you come or go into his presence or the presence of a senior monk, you stop and you bow 3 times. And that was a very kind of core practice for checking in on the mind, reestablishing mindfulness of the body. The work chores were generally to be done silent so that people could really focus and practice mindfulness of the body and watch over their mind. So, okay, well, let's see. We have a whole bunch of people here. If anyone has any impressions of the talk last night, or any, let's see, we have somebody calling in. Let's see if we can take a call. Hello, Shelley. You can mute the stream so we don't have an echo. Hello, Shelley. You can mute the stream so we don't have an echo.
Okay, here goes. Yesterday, I was practicing walking in the forest, and then I decided, well, nobody said you couldn't run. So I ran, and I walked to see what arose, see how it was different. And I do believe that the running was like you were referring to the guy on the beach. And it was actually easier to focus while I was running.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts on that, Ajahn? Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of my experience. Sometimes more extreme activity is what it takes for us to kind of take it seriously enough to kind of focus. But even in walking meditation, sometimes I'll adjust the speed of my walking. It's just like the mind needs something a bit more challenging um, to make it interesting enough to focus in on it. So there's a place for formal walking meditation, but there's nothing wrong with being mindful, and no matter what you do, and including running. Uh, but to me, that the real lesson there is that sort of discrimination and adaptability. Sort of notice, like, okay, this is not working. What do I need to change? And you can change what you're doing. You can change your posture. You can change your meditation, or you can change your mind in some way to sort of enhance and arouse kind of wholesome states of mind. So, and running, because you are floating in a sense, falling forward at a very fast pace, catching yourself and running along, can be very pleasurable, um, especially if you can get out of your head and into the body and just be there, sort of witnessing and feeling the experience. So,
Would the Buddha have approved?
would the Buddha have approved of running mindfully?
Yeah.
I think so, but not for the monks. The monks are not supposed to go running about. So,
Oh, too bad. Well, thank you.
okay, thanks. So I hope people could hear that. I think there's a feature here where when someone calls in, it takes a few seconds or so until the audio from Skype connects. So, all right, well, we're coming up on 8:30. It's just maybe a couple. Let's see if there's any other kind of sharings or comments. I don't think there's any time for another call. So I have a few people here. Let's see. Mariam, so when we're meditating, if we notice one needs to change from the breath to something else like metta, is it okay? Well, it depends on your determination. Like if you really have made a clear determination to cultivate breath meditation, then it's probably best to stick with that according to your determination. Just like to learn not how to be too fickle, but there's a balance. And I always say have a tiered strategy. And if the breath really isn't working, then uh, pick up a different, more suitable object for then. So remember, the main thing we want to be doing is putting forth right effort and resolving unskillful states of mind, including the hindrances, and cultivating skillful states of mind. So that's our overarching kind of goal. Let's see, one more here. Steve, regarding Kayanupassana practice, I recall Ajahn Amaro suggesting in one talk to simply try being aware of getting up and sitting down during the day. Yeah, that is a good one. Transitions are really good. Another one is like opening and closing doors. We would often get encouragement in the monastery to be very mindful of that. One, because that tends to be a place where you're sending a lot of sounds and maybe disturbing people as you're coming in and out of the of a room. But also that is a transition. So like you be off in the forest in your hut, you're all alone, you don't really have to worry about disturbing other people so much. And you're walking in, you're kind of focusing on being mindful of walking, but maybe also you're thinking of where it is you're going, what it is you need to do, and preparing yourself for that. And then when you get there, stop, pause, mindfully open the door. And actually, there's a bunch of extra protocols in Thailand where I trained. You need to take your shoes off. You need to wash your feet. You need to dry your feet before you enter the building to make sure your feet are clean before entering. And then, as I said, as you come in, then you bow, and then you go about your business. So transitions can be a really good place to develop mindfulness of the body. And I would say pick a handful and make a commitment to yourself. It's an experiment. So, on one day or for a week or for the period of this retreat, you could write down a handful of postures that you're going to commit to trying to be mindful of. And one thing I found in trying to develop practice and more awareness around things like that is if you catch yourself missing it, missing your mark, just stop. I used to do this a lot with walking meditation. I'd be walking back and forth, and the mind would drift away. And at the point I would realize that, I would just stop, reestablish mindfulness, and start again. And in training yourself to be mindful of various habits, it can be really good to sort of stop. So, like I used to be really mindful about trying to make sure I locked the door to the house when I went off into the forest for the night. And, if I got back to my hut and I didn't have clear awareness that I had locked the door, I made a determination to stop, go back, check it. And in time, that kind of reinforced the wholesome sort of habit of establishing mindfulness around that and clear awareness. And like I would get back to my hut and I knew that it was locked and I knew that I had locked it. And I knew I had that experience of being aware of that. And we can do that in the cultivation of a lot of sort of healthy habits. And catch yourself, just stop and begin again. And in time, you're retraining the mind to bring about an extra level of mindfulness and heedfulness around that particular posture, that particular sort of activity. So, all right. Well, let's see. I think we're going to leave it at that for today. Mika? Is this the Mika that I know and love that lives in Europe? The best walking meditations I had were immediately after a hard run. Seemed to increase my awareness focus. Yeah. Energy is an important constituent of meditation. And so, and sometimes exercising or showering or doing something that arouses good energy, both emotional, positive sort of mental energy as well as physical energy, can be very helpful. And part of the value of walking meditation is you're kind of energizing the body, getting the circulation going, and then when you go and you sit down, there's this relaxation effect that happens, which can be a really wholesome condition then to notice and tap into as you establish yourself in meditation. Like I always feel this, no matter how much I enjoyed the walking meditation, when I sit down, there's that, I'm at rest. I'm back to stillness, which is delicious. And like, you attend to that sign because that's a wholesome impression that can really condition a good session of meditation. Okay, well, it is just after 8:30 now, so we'll leave it at that today. And once again, I hope the sun is shining where you are, and we'll see you all in the various events today. For those participating in the retreat, and for the rest of you, I'll see you tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. So have a good day, be mindful, and stay with the experience of the body. Bye for now.